and research on veterans and military families.
Thank you. On behalf of the University of Southern California, the School of Social Work, and the Center for Innovation and Research on Military Veterans and their families, I want to welcome you to USC's Town Hall meeting with Admiral Mullen. It is indeed a great honor to be able to host such an event here at USC and in the great city of Los Angeles. As I look across the sea of people, I said sea, Admiral, the sea of people, I can't help but recognize the diverse community representation in this room from not only USC, Los Angeles, and surrounding communities. I look through my periscope, Admiral, and I see community partners from the military, government, medical, mental health, education, business, not-for-profit, cultural organizations, and many more. I know this because I've seen all of the RSVPs come in from all over this large city of Los Angeles, but all the surrounding communities down in San Diego, all the way up to the northern portions here of the LA counties. There are people of different ages in here, ethnic backgrounds, points of view and life experiences coming together in one room at one time, which is an awesome, awesome thing. This gathering today is exactly what USC represents, a vibrant culture of community engagement that cuts across academic as well as geographic boundaries in the pursuit of knowledge, research, partnerships, and service. I would like to acknowledge a number of folks this afternoon. I'd first like to start off with Dean Marilyn Flynn, our visionary leader from the School of Social Work, and someone who has unwavering support for our veterans and military families, Dean Flynn. Junichi Ihara, the Consul General of Japan. Verna Daughtry, our dear friend and USC trustee. USC trustee Martin Levine, sir. USC Vice Provost Randall Hall. Vice Provost for Research and Advancement. All the USC deans in attendance. Randy Hill, the Executive Director for the Institute for Creative Technologies. All right, I think I messed up along the way. Why don't we wait until we're finished and everybody applaud? I'm sorry, I should have said it earlier. An important friend of our School of Social Work, Dr. Jeff Wilkins from the Lindsay Foundation, whose generous support has made our Center for Innovation and Research a reality. Thank you. And that's it. That's all of them. We can round of applause. All right. Oh, well, you could imagine I'm a bit nervous, but. Would all the veterans in the room raise their hands, please? Wow. Thank you to all my brothers and sisters of this beautiful, wonderful family that we have in the military. It never goes away. And of course, a very strong welcome to Deborah Mullen. Please stand up, Mrs. Mullen, and show everyone who you are. Before we begin our town hall conversation, I would like to introduce to you the New Directions Veterans Choir. If you would please come up to the stage. This veteran choir is comprised of formerly homeless veterans with a combined 130, but I think I might have that number a little bit off. It's around 170, I believe, years of homelessness together combined. They represent that change and recovery is possible. Let's give them a round of applause. New Direction is a Los Angeles not-for-profit organization serving veterans with both outpatient and residential services. They serve more than 1,000 veterans in Los Angeles. Tony Renis, the CEO of New Directions, would you please stand up to be recognized for your wonderful program and unwavering commitment? You should also know that the New Directions Veterans Choir has made it through the first round of America's Got Talent. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they win it all. And I think you'll agree with me here as they perform for us the national anthem. Please stand.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
They are awesome. Thank you. By now, you have read newspaper articles, listened to radio talk shows, watched television, heard the documentaries, may even have had a conversation over dinner about the challenges confronting our veterans and their families. You can now probably define the acronym PTSD, and you probably can even explain what a surge is. But it's hard to ignore and deny the impact that the war in Afghanistan and Iraq is having on our service members, veterans, families, and communities within our society. The evidence is irrefutable. The number and types of injuries, the frequency of deployments, the nature of our military force, the consequences for family life and children, and the conduct of this war itself have combined to create unparalleled challenges for our society. However, starting today at this town hall meeting, I propose that we, USC, the City of Los Angeles, and all of you begin working together in a deliberate and strategic manner to reach out and connect with our veterans, their families, and communities to address these aforementioned challenges. Our community of veterans, underscored, deserves the best we can offer. We, you, me, must work together starting today. This moment cannot be lost. And as such, who better to lead our conversation today than the 17th Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Michael Mullen. The Admiral serves as the principal military advisor to the President, the Secretary of Defense, the National Security Council, and the Homeland Security Council. He leads an American institution of more than 2 million soldiers, sailors, Marine, and Air Force men and women. A Los Angeles native and surface warfare officer, Admiral Mullen graduated from the Naval Academy in 1968. He has commanded 3 ships, Cruiser Destroyer Group 2, the George Washington Battle Group, the U.S. Second Fleet, and has served as the NATO Joint Forces Commander. Prior to becoming chairman, Admiral Mullen was the 28th Chief of Naval Operations. Please extend a warm welcome to Admiral Mullen. Sir, if you would please join me on the stage. I have said to the Admiral 25 years, and I've never gotten this close to an Admiral, more or less a general officer, but I can tell you, the old saying goes, if my friends could see me now. Admiral Mullen, we are very happy to have you here today and lead us in a conversation about issues that are important to our military and civilian society, including ways that educational institutions like USC can promote and support opportunity for veterans. So welcome and thank you. Sir, why don't we begin with you explaining to us why you're here today?
Well, thank you, Dr. Hassan, and I did note all that nautical terminology that you use. I was pretty impressed for an airman. It really is an honor to be here this afternoon with my wife, Deborah. We have traveled on this journey for almost 40 years together. And it really started, our journey in the military started not too far from here when I was 17 and made a decision to go to Annapolis because actually I had a mentor of mine that thought it might be a good idea even if I didn't, and didn't really understand it. And that decision obviously changed my life and our lives forever. It really is great to be back home, and it's also great to see so many from the community who are eager to learn and help and volunteer and make a difference for our men and women who have served and our men and women who are serving right now. Over 2.2 million men and women in the military and all four of our services right now. They are the best I've ever seen in the 40-plus years that I've been doing this. And I can compare, because I was there then, and that's not in any way, shape, or form to be critical of those who served in the past. I can just tell you that they are extraordinary people. They come from all parts of our country and actually many nations around the world, and they really do make a difference. I indicated how long I've been in. I mean, I started in the late 60s, and so the backdrop for me is Vietnam, and that's a time that many of you will remember where the American people didn't support our men and women in uniform. And when these wars started in 2001, one of the first antennas that went up for me and questions was, are the American people going to support our men and women? And I can say unequivocally that over the course of this decade, that the evidence has come in that the American people support that categorically support our men and women in uniform, and it is a very, very positive view from my perspective, and it is something that our men and women in uniform want to understand and they pay attention to. Outside the politics, outside the debates about the wars, the American people are very strongly in support of those who serve and have made such a difference for our country and sacrificed so much. To hear the New Directions Choir, and I actually asked them if I could get their autograph a little while ago. They do us all so proud in so many ways. Deborah and I actually had an opportunity about a year ago, I think, to visit New Directions. And one of the areas that we try to focus on is homelessness in our veterans community. And the reason, again, that we do that is because when I grew up, we left a lot of veterans on the streets, and they are still, the Vietnam veterans and others, but they are still on the streets. And I want to do everything I can to make sure that doesn't happen again. There are those who believe we will generate them 4 times more quickly than we did post-Vietnam. There are those that believe that they are being generated at 4 times the number as we did in Vietnam. And so part of what I think our responsibility is to raise the visibility on this issue so that it can be attacked early, because it clearly wasn't in post-Vietnam. And there are opportunities by virtue of that knowledge that I think we really have to take advantage of in these times. Part of why I'm here as well in representing those who are serving, we have a system in our country that is comprised of the Department of Defense, the veterans, the VA, and then communities throughout the country. And too often those systems are disconnected. I take my most precious asset, precious resource, my people, do everything I can for them while they serve, and then when they leave the military, they enter the VA system, and sometimes they do it having knowledge of what that's about, but many times they don't have a clue about the extensive benefits that are there being administered by the VA. And then they actually return to communities throughout the country. And we sort of say, from the military perspective, thanks for your service, turn you over to the VA. The VA does as much as they can, and then we say, back to your communities and have a nice life. And that's not an acceptable model from my perspective, because we're too detached from those who sacrificed so much. We've lost over 5,000 men and women since these wars started. We've got some 30 to 40,000 with visible physical injuries, and we've got hundreds of thousands with PTS and mental injuries, the invisible kind, traumatic brain injury, mild or serious, that I feel obligated to both give voice to, and that the totality of the Department of Defense, the VA, and communities throughout the country do all we can to repay the debt that we've asked, that these young people have generated by virtue of their service and their sacrifice. Again, they're the best I've ever seen. They've gone off and done what we as the American people have asked them to do. Their lives have actually changed in many ways forever, but I'm very fond of saying their dreams have not. They still would like an education, and there's a tremendous opportunity now because of the GI Bill, which hundreds of thousands of them are taking and will continue to take advantage of. It's a very, very significant benefit. It's a very inexpensive investment in our people, because this is also a generation whose service will not just be seen here in the military, but I think they will serve for decades to come. They will serve their communities. They will serve their nation. I think they will serve the world. So an investment in that education is absolutely critical. They bring great potential, and too often our system focuses on the word disability. Our system focuses too much on compensation. And I'd like to see us focus on ability, not disability. I don't want to see veterans as a burden. I think veterans are part of the solution in communities and for our country. They have tremendous life experience. They are extraordinary people, as are their families. And so how do we take advantage of that as they transition, in particular, back into communities throughout the country? And they do have challenges, but where challenges exist, opportunities exist. And the three areas that I would like to focus on is our education, and I spoke to that. Health is another, and employment is a third. We must continue to recognize them. That means the parades are important, the recognition ceremonies are important. When I write letters to the families of those who we've lost, one of the things I say, I promise you, I will never forget. We can never forget these sacrifices. And so we must continue the recognition and the reminder, but at the same time, these are young people typically in their 20s. They're going to live 50, 60, 70 years from now, and they have great opportunities, great potential to impact in so many positive ways, and they need the education. They need training. They are going to need good health care, and they clearly are going to need employment. So how do we come together, really the three entities I talked about, to make a difference? And while the Department of Defense certainly is doing all it can, and it can and has responsibilities, the VA is doing the same thing. This is a scope and scale, and also a place where the biggest part of it, I think, is in communities throughout the country. So why did I come to USC? Not just because I grew up in Southern California, but because, in great part, the leadership here is so well connected to the community. And so what I intend to do, what I'm doing now, is speaking throughout the country, is principally based at universities and colleges, not because of the education aspect of it, although that is critically important, but because universities and colleges are so well connected to the communities in which they live. And it is the community leadership that I think needs to step forward to meet this. And I want to try to, at least, and hopefully I can do this afternoon, lay out what some of the challenges are and what the needs are. I fundamentally believe that in our country, and I see it, I talk to citizens all over the country, there is a sea of goodwill out there that wants to help. And the question is, if I'm a citizen, or I'm an NGO, an organization, or nonprofit, or a thriving business, how can I help? How do I connect? And it is through this model in local communities where that connection, I think, can be made and needs to be made, and then that then scales across the country to communities throughout the country. So I am hoping to be able to enable and help inform leaders of this need to match what I know is a desire out there to try to help, and center it here at places like the University of Southern California, but not just lay it on USC as a central point here because it has such great community outreach. And the challenges from my perspective are immense, and the opportunities as well. So I very much appreciate in all the things that we're doing, and we have immense challenges in the country, and I understand that. I am focused on those that I care the most about, those who serve, those who have served, and made such a difference, and that our country recognizes that and actually enables them to be the incredible difference makers that they have been thus far and can continue to be for decades to come. So it's a long answer to a question, Doc, but that's why I'm here.
Thank you, Admiral Mullen. Perhaps you and I could have a brief conversation. I could ask you one or two questions before we turn it over to the audience, maybe just one, because we do want to hear what everyone else in the room has to say. I'm sorry I forgot, but there's a gentleman in the crowd, sir, that came all the way from Yuma, Arizona, who drove here with his spouse just to hear you. David Watts is a Marine, disabled Marine, who's going to school to get his bachelor's degree in social work and who wants to get his master's degree in social work from USC. David, please stand up.
Thank you, David.
David drove all the way here from Yuma with his family, and so that's a good transition for me, sir. There's been a lot of attention given to our military families over the last few years, and I'm so happy to see that. I was wondering if you can give us an update and let us know how our military families are doing.
This was not planned. I actually can speak to this, but believe me, Deborah can speak to it a lot better than I.
This really wasn't planned. You know, our military families, part of what they do is they support and allow the military to serve. And what we have now after these years of war since 9/11 is family members who have withstood multiple deployments. They are under great stress. When I speak with spouses, they tell me that they suffer post-traumatic stress symptoms. Now, that may not be an accurate statement, but what they're experiencing is depression, anxiety, sleeplessness, anger. Many of them that I hear about from leadership spouses are literally unable to get up in the morning. and they are unable to get their children to school. So we have issues that are going to be impactful on these families for a long time to come. We understand that mission readiness really is a factor related to family readiness. So what we have to do is we have to look at these families, find ways to build resiliency into them so they're able to withstand these kinds of separations and therefore allow the service member to do their job. And without that, it does impact the mission. And so they are an integral part of one another, the service member and the family. And this also extends out to mothers and fathers. It's not just the spouse and children. What Michael is trying to do is talk about the service that the families also provide. In addition, we have families of the fallen who have literally, their family has paid the ultimate sacrifice with the loss of their loved one. And those families continue to struggle in trying to break through a system that's very bureaucratic. And we need to remember them and find ways to support them. Some remain nearby the installation. Others go home to communities around the country. And people really don't understand what they've suffered. They don't understand the long-term impacts on their children. And so we're really trying to raise awareness for that. The issue of homelessness is something that is so appalling to us that it exists. We know that female veterans are the largest growing group of homeless veterans. They bring with them often children. We need to understand this. We need to address this. What I talk to spouses when they ask me about why we're where we are, a lot of us expected the wars to be over sooner than they were, and so we sort of fell behind, and we didn't understand the kind of long-term impact, the number of deployments, the stresses that these families would go through. And so we are trying to play catch-up in a time where we're still at war, where we're still generating the problems. And that becomes a difficult issue, and one that not just Michael and me, but leadership in the military across the board, the VA, are all trying to address. And a big part of this is the community. And so I appreciate your being here and any kind of support that you can give. So thank you.
Let me, to be very specific about the pace, because I think that's important to understand. The major units in the Army, our brigades right now, are starting, as I stand here, their 5th one-year deployment since 2003. That's not all of them. And the first one wasn't a year, it was like 6 months. Second one was 18 months. Then we went to 15 months, 15 months, and 12 months. And one of the ways I tell the story about this is if I were a 10-year-old boy or girl and my mom or dad were in one of these units, I just went off to college, and my mom or dad hadn't been home very much in the whole time throughout my teenage years. So we are also at a time where the time between deployments, and our Army was not a deploying force before these wars started. The time between deployments is about as long at home as you've been away. So in the Marine Corps, and we call that a 1-to-1 ratio, the Marine Corps typically deploys for 7 months. 7 on, 7 off, 7 on, and they're on their 5th, 6th, 7th deployment. They come back from that deployment, and 30 days later, their head's going back in the game because they got to start getting ready for the next deployment. So the relationship issues inside a family, and as that would extend to everything they do, not just difficult now, but we think there will be many challenges associated with those in the future as well. I visited Fort Campbell, I guess it was about a year ago. I was on this visit, and I've been back a couple times since. But I talked to Special Forces, some Special Forces members, and I'd say, how many deployments you've been on? And one answer from a pilot was 17, and the other, when I asked his buddy next door, was 23. Now, these are not 6-month or 12-month deployments, but it's still, they're 90 days, 120 days. And the special forces they're on a 1-to-1 ratio right now as well. And they will be. Over the next 2 years, we'll see that tempo slow down a little bit. We're going to come down to about 50,000 in Iraq here by the end of August. What our long-term presence in Iraq is, I don't know right now. We will work out our future with Iraq after they stand up this new government, but right now we're scheduled to have everybody out of Iraq by the end of 2011. We will add a few more troops in Afghanistan, but the number won't go up substantially, and so we actually can see about the number that we are going to be deployed at, the level we're going to be deployed at. So our ratio, which has been 1-to-1, will improve to 2-to-1. We need that time at home to do lots of things that we haven't been able to do in the course of this decade, to address the issues, the family issues that Deborah described, the stress on the force that's out there, and they have been unbelievably good, unbelievably resilient, but they're also pushed exceptionally hard. And that's where I get into, it's very easy for me to say, this is the best I've ever been associated with in the 42 years that I've had the privilege of wearing the uniform. But the pressure is enormous. And again, many of them will stay and make careers in the military. Many of them will not do that. The vast majority won't. They'll return to communities throughout the country, which is really the essence of what we're here to talk about today.
Thank you, Mrs. Mullen. Sir, can we turn this over to the audience now?
Sure.
Okay. Ma'am. I'm sorry. Raise your hand and we'll bring a mic to you. I'm sorry. One's coming now. We have a mic coming on this side and one here. Right here, if you would. Please stand and thank you.
Thank you very much.
If you could pick whoever's next now and be near them with a mic, this thing will move more quickly. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name's Karen Oakham, and I'm the news editor for Frontiers in LA, which is a gay publication here. So first of all, I want to thank you very much for your service and all the service members here and the veterans here, because we're gay Americans, so we appreciate the service. Sir, you're talking about the enormous pressure that service members are under, and I'm wondering if you've imagined that pressure in addition to serving in silence under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And so there's a two-part question. First of all, will you include all this PTSD in the report that the working group is going to consider, because there's stress and anxiety serving in silence, number one. And number two, I'm wondering if you would commit now to saying that at the end of, when the report is due in December, the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell implementation report is due on December 1st. 60 days thereafter, if you would immediately call for the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell and implementation of that, because otherwise you're continuing to have all these service members suffering in silence. Thank you very much.
So just where we are in the process right now with respect to the review and potential repeal for the Don't Ask, Don't Tell legislation. As I try to point out, this is a law. This is something that our Congress must do. I've been pretty clear where I've been on this in my testimony on the 2nd of February last year, that it's my personal view that we need to move on here, and I believe it's the right thing to do. That said, it's really Congress that potentially will make these changes. And there was a legislation passed in the Senate Armed Services Committee I think it was 2 weeks ago now, in the full House, that supported this. And the language in the legislation I'm comfortable with, quite frankly, and I've said I would have preferred that the legislation wait until we finish the review, because there are a lot very strong views on this, an awful lot of emotion. Fact is, in terms of any kind of objective analysis on how this will affect those it will affect the most, if and when the law changes, isn't out there. And so the purpose of the review is for those of us in the military And my top priority is the readiness to execute our missions. And there are different views on what this current law does and what the change might do. But to those it would affect the most, we just don't know. So the purpose of this review is to make sure their voices are heard and we understand it from them and their families, then to take that into consideration as we move ahead. So I clearly can't speak to the results of that before I see it. The current legislation, and again, predicting a legislative time clock can be challenging, and while these two pieces of legislation passed, there's still a lot that needs to be done to complete it. And in the legislation, there's language, part of the language says that myself, the Secretary of Defense, and the President can certify that we are ready to proceed. Part of the reason for the review is to understand what the implementation issues will be. I am the senior military leader in this country. I have a responsibility to this force to lead them and to understand what challenges would be associated with that, and to both prepare them to do that should this law change. So that's where we are right now. That's literally where we are as far as the process is concerned. With respect to the PTS aspect of it, we will initiate part of the review. Sorry, it is being headed up by a four-star general by the name of Carter Ham, and the Secretary of Defense Gates General Counsel, Jay Johnson. I have great regard for both of them. They have been in front of groups totaling about 30,000 as of a week or 10 days ago when I last talked to General Ham about this. That said, we will initiate a survey of several 100,000 members and families here starting towards the end of this month. That survey will actually, and it's big enough, and the questions are the right questions, so we will be able to statistically neck this down to meaningful results and understand, again, from them, and their voices are very important here, how they feel about this and what their concerns are. We also want to understand as much about all the issues that we potentially would have to deal with. So there's an awful lot of work that goes on, and then it gets me back, that is going on right now, and it gets me back to part of what I talked about earlier. This is a force under great stress right now, given 2 wars, number of deployments, et cetera. And I do not want this issue, I do not want the United States military put in the middle of this issue and electrified as we move ahead. It hasn't been thus far, and I hope we can continue the review along those lines. And I think responsible leadership throughout is very, very important as we move ahead. And I have no doubt that we will get through the review. The President has made his intent very clear that he wants this law changed. So I'm talking about process and where we are, but at the top of my list is the concern for the men and women and their families who this will affect the most, and making sure that as we move ahead and execute whatever missions we have, that we do it as well as we can possibly do it, equal to the level of excellence I talked about that they have, that I see in our force right now.
Thank you.
I understand I understand where we are. I understand the law. I mean the reason I believe it's time is I cannot. I find it very difficult to support the fact that someone has to come to work every day and lie about who they are and what they, and what they believe in an institution that values integrity. And I was raised in this institution, so I've been very clear about that. Again, I'm not the one in charge of changing the law, and I don't expect to be in the future. It's really up to Congress.
Thank you. In the back, gentlemen.
Yes, Admiral Mullen, thank you so much for coming today. And I'm a pastor. I've been pastoring for about 20 years. I'm also an entrepreneur for about 40 years. I have employees and people working for me. But I guess the concern we have is, are you open to discuss viable solutions regarding homeland security, in particular, protecting our borders, and also, I guess, some of the things that have happened recently in Arizona, where I believe that what they did was right. That's my own personal opinion. But also, I think there should have been some kind of plan for those who really, really wanted to stay. Maybe that's maybe a two-part question, but that's what in my feeling, there should have been some means that we provided our Latino brothers and sisters before they were pushed out. They are neighbors. We're all immigrants. How are we doing to protect the borders, but also what are we doing to encourage those who are here to stay?
Let me not answer that question, but answer it anyway. I'm the senior military officer in the United States military, and all of us in the military execute policy. We don't create policy. So the question you ask is, in the heart of those who create policy, and I work hard to stay out of that in terms of my views in terms of recent decisions or where we ought to go. Certainly, I recognize there are huge challenges with respect to our border. I've actually got a substantial number of, in particular, National Guard who are in support of the agencies who work this border every single day. But it really is up to the president and other political leadership throughout the country to figure out what's the best way to move ahead here. That said, because you are a pastor and because you are an entrepreneur, I would like to take you back to what I was talking about earlier with respect to organizations and characteristics that I think can help us meet the needs of those veterans that are returning to your parish and to communities throughout the country. And that you have connections in the community which are critical, but also the entrepreneurial, innovative, adaptive aspect of this, which oftentimes governments are not entrepreneurial, innovative, adaptable. I think we are more than we used to be, but we struggle at that. And what I'd like to be able to do is connect with someone like you and your community and others like you to be able to connect to those who are returning and, again, who can, I think, contribute so much in the future and take advantage of the innovative entrepreneurial characteristics that you bring to the table as well. That's what I meant by I wasn't going to answer your question.
Thank you, sir.
Admiral Jerry Sullivan, thank you and Mrs. Mullen for taking the time to come out and help us begin to focus on this problem. Would particularly be interested in your thinking on the role of various federal agencies and entities in collaborating with private entities in furthering the service and the support to both combat veterans, their families, and maybe with particular emphasis on the caretakers, where that's such a big issue with what we're dealing with today.
Part of what I try to do by coming to this is lay out what I think our challenges are, and I obviously represent the government, particularly the Department of Defense. I think there's, back to the community-based aspect of this, and what I said, health, education, and employment. I think there are enormous opportunities for private businesses to be able to impact this problem set, the challenge on the employment side. I've seen some extraordinary outreach on the part of very, very innovative business leaders to make this connection. And I would hope that, again, I'm here at USC because the institution is so well connected to the community, as other universities and colleges are, but not limited to them in terms of how do they touch those that could make a difference. And then specifically, the caretaker issue, it is, we need, from my perspective, some pretty innovative solutions to care that is needed. When I talk about dreams, I've talked about dreams not changing as veterans return. It's the education, training, it's employment. It's typically these days 2 salaries, both spouses working, and they'd like to own a home, own a piece of the rock. So how do we, from a caretaker perspective, how do we, where it's needed, how do we provide that in a way where this family can thrive would be, and I don't know specifically because I'm just not in the business community enough, but I can't believe there aren't some pretty innovative solutions that are already out there that we could adapt to these families as they return. Part of, as I look at those who want to help, part of why I'm here is not to try to change how you look at them or how you're doing or even what you're focused on. I just like you to open up the lens a little bit and to include those American citizens, veterans who've given so much just in the scope of what you're doing. Know that they're there. What Dr. Hassan said earlier is also really important, or actually, and what Deborah said. Sorry, I meant to say what Deborah said was really important. It's really important that I say that.
I didn't know I had that much status.
Yeah. But it is the understanding of what I've been through. If I'm a National Guardsman from Vermont, and I just deployed to Afghanistan for 9 or 10 months, and I lost in very, very messy, bloody, difficult, incredible combat 10 or 15 of my buddies, and I come back on a Friday from that, I fly in, and Monday I'm back to work or a week from Monday, I'm back to work in my job. My fellow workers don't have a clue what I've been through. I'm not anxious to talk about it that much in particular. I may be struggling with that, but they just don't have a clue. If I am a Guard family in Pocatello, Idaho, I'm the only family in my neighborhood that's deployed with the Idaho National Guard. My support network in that neighborhood doesn't exist in terms of understanding what I'm going through. We're improving in that regard, but that's sort of the edge of the universe challenge that we have all over the country, in addition to the challenges we have around our bases and communities that naturally support, because so many of our people are living out there. But that is not the majority of the people in the United States military anymore. We're not where we used to be. So, and the caregiver aspect of it is a big part of it. And the care that a family needs to move ahead, certainly initially as you transition based on what your injury might be, is a huge piece as well.
Thank you, sir. Kristen, right there, that lady right there, yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Admiral. My name's Stephanie Stone. I'm the chair for the LA County Veterans Advisory Commission, and I'd like to talk about or ask you a question about military sexual trauma. Back in 2005, I had the honor of walking through West LA's VA's hospital, and we went through the women's clinic. There were a couple of doctors that were doing a study, and they were saying to us that 1 of every 3 women coming through the clinic were reporting as victims of military sexual trauma. Since that time, I haven't seen the numbers change that much. I know the DOD is doing training, I know the DVA is giving treatment, but there's not a lot being done in the community around awareness. I'd like to know from you, what is the DOD actually doing in terms of training, and what's your vision in terms of how to alleviate this issue?
Well, in about the 2004-2005 timeframe, and at that time I had a different job as the number 2 officer in the Navy, and there was a tremendous amount of focus brought to answering the question you just asked because of the number of reported sexual assaults, first of all. Secondly, because of the lack of decent databases to have any idea what our baseline was, and then you throw on top of that the difficulty of the whole sexual assault issue in terms of reporting, the he said, she said aspect of that, the victimization aspect of it, which is just as dominant in the military as it is in society. And And at that time, not that we weren't committed, but a renewed commitment on the part of the military leadership to understand this much better than we did at the time, and in particular understand it coming out of Iraq, mostly because of the number of reports of sexual assaults in theater or reported later on having been there. That generated a great number of changes in terms of establishing databases, establishing reporting requirements, creating intervention capability and support in units all over the military that was much more focused than it had been. That said, we still don't have our arms around it, and we by no means, to your point, have we solved it. We get too many reports from female vets, you said 1 in 3, almost to a person, who have served in theater, who report sexual assault or sexual harassment. So it is not tolerated one bit. The goal in the military is 0, but we're a long way from that. And leaders are aware of this and still attacking this issue. But even in the period from 2005, when you said that you visited the VA here, we're aware that that problem continues significantly, and we need to continue to address it. And actually interfacing with you and others, institutions throughout the country, in terms of solutions would also be very helpful. Things that are working that we may not have done before, may not implement, may not understand. So an exceptional amount of effort going into this, but we know we're not where we need to be.
Thank you, sir. We can take one more or two more. What would you like, sir? Question? Two. Okay, here's one, and then the gentleman. No, sir, you're after her.
Mary Alice Jordan Marsh. I'm on the faculty in the School of Social Work, and the daughter of an Army vet, and I have in my extended family a CB who's been to Iraq 3 times. So I have particular concern about families who are geographically distant staying connected. You may have heard that SC does a little bit of work with digital games, and I'm working with a partner in cinema on a game that would be focused on bringing families together through gaming. So I have 2 questions. One is, how many people have had very negative attitudes toward games in the past? How is the military reacting to that? And I think that grandparents are an important aspect of this intergenerational connection. And I understand there's been a policy change recently where grandparents are more thought of as part of the nuclear family in the military. Can you?
I really like games. That's not important. What is important is I can't remember this is my 3rd session today, so I can't remember if I mentioned it, but the average age in units throughout our military is in the 20s, and they like games. So because they like games, I like games. What is instructive to me is we travel and look at sort of the leading edge technology of where we're going. It's involving gaming in so many ways. We've seen gaming. I mean, I saw it here really fundamentally in ICT today. Saw essentially the gaming issue play out, the technology that's there. We recently visited the University of Pittsburgh, where they have invested at McGowan Institute, which is very tightly linked to the University of Pittsburgh, the very positive effects of gaming on regaining, rapidly improving motor skills after a very, very bad amputation or a very bad blast. So I see it in many, many places, and I've never experienced someone say that we don't do gaming. I mean that pushing pushing back hard on that. And I also see it in a lot of our development for our new systems, because we've got generations who've grown up on it. They adapt to it. They feed it back to us that this works, this doesn't. I've seen it at Walter Reed. I've seen actually where I first saw it most recently in the current wars was down at Brooke Army Medical, where innovative technology to help in rehabilitation that essentially is gaming based. So and they're very, very responsive to it. So we are as well. If we're not, I'll leave you my card. You got to tell me, because I believe we need to be. I really do. And then secondly, it's interesting that you use the term nuclear family. I tell the story that probably just about 3 years ago now, Deborah and I were with a group of families and military members in Vilseck, Germany, where we still have thousands who are stationed. And this young specialist, very junior Army member, stood up and asked me about when we were going to change the rules so her best friend could be, which was her only family. So when are we going to include her best friend in the benefits world, fundamentally? Now, she got kind of poo-pooed by the audience writ large. I think the audience writ large missed the question. And I think what's going on here is the change in what a family is. And that many of us, now I'll say this for the military because I speak for the military, but I think it's going on in lots of other places as well. And this gets into benefits and support and, you know, all kinds of things that are not inexpensive. So immediately, sometimes the red flag goes up. That's a lot more money. I don't know that that's the case. So your comment, I mean, we see it with grandparents all the time. We see dual military couples. Just at Fort Benning last week, you know, a young soldier who's trying to they've got 1 or 2 kids. Her husband's in the military. They're just trying to figure out where the kids are going to be. You know, when is daycare open? When can I get them there? What's my shift? What's yours? I mean, they're living a very, very chaotic life in terms of just trying to balance that. And that's just one example. So many, I met a young Marine captain earlier this week on these issues, and she is now a single mother. So she sends her daughter, I think, home to her mom in Chicago for the time, and she's about to go out for the 3rd time and deploy. And she wants to do that. I'm not arguing we should here, but I think we need to ask the question, is that that's certainly part of her family, but are there things that we as an institution should be doing to make that easier? Those are booming questions in terms of the kind of change that I see just where Deborah and I live with members and families, which is vastly different from even 10 years ago, and I don't even want to talk about how different it was when I came in. I mean, one of the things that when I got this job, which was not a plan, and we were both surprised, and I live with a wonderful woman who's dedicated a lot of her adult life, not just to the 2 boys we raised, because I was gone a lot, but to Navy families. I mean, that's where we came from. And I can remember when we decided to take this job, and I mean it, we did decide to do this. But Deborah said, well, what am I going to do? I've been focused on Navy families, and yet what she has been able to do now is really be a leader in identifying family issues and challenges for us across every service now, and we see them all, and everybody's got them. And I also am blessed because when I get home at night, I get my list. Have you looked at this, this, and this? And any leader needs that. Typically, what's on the list is what I haven't looked at to be reminded of these kinds of issues. So we know we've got huge. I think the challenges are bigger than we realize with our families. And then I'll go back and wrap up with what Deb said earlier. Much different than before 2001. And our families have always been critical. always throughout my career. But our families, their health and welfare, their readiness is directly tied to our success or failure as a military. We cannot do it without them, and it's different than it was because of the pace and because of what we've asked them to do and because of what they've stepped up to do in these unbelievably challenging times. Thank you. Oh, there's one more, sorry.
Thank you very much for your leadership and your compassion, you and your spouse. There are many young men and women that are being discharged from the military with characterizations that make them ineligible for various programs and services that may even impact their life, like employment. Are commanders really looking at all aspects of the service member before they discharge them?
Well, I got a lot of commanders. And I come from a background that believes in leadership and depends on those who lead, both officer and enlisted. And I have great faith in them. We couldn't be where we are without superb performance across the board, every service, including our Coast Guard, and looking at what they've done over the course of the last decade. I also believe in what they're supposed to do to make sure our people are well taken care of. And I, by virtue of that belief in them, accept that or believe that they're making the best decisions about individuals who are being discharged. Does that mean we have it 100% right? No, and I know exactly what you're talking about in terms of the kinds of discharges we're talking about. Those are, at least my experience is, the risks of that to the individual when they generate that kind of discharge, usually pretty well explained before it happens, usually pretty well explained long before it happens, before the final event which says that's enough, you're leaving. And my own experience is that sometimes it's just not, they're not interested in it. Now, over time, we all grow up and their interest might be changed dramatically as they become older and understand the impact of what that discharge means. There is a process to refile, to have it reviewed. I couldn't speak to how often that happens, but I know it exists, to have your record corrected. But we work pretty hard to try to tell them, to understand the impact of a discharge that isn't honorable, a general discharge which still garners you most of the benefits, but other than honorable and below that, you don't get much at all, if anything. So I appreciate the question. I'm tied to the leadership that makes our military the best it's ever been, and that they are, by and large, making good decisions with respect to that. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Admiral Mullen. This has been a great event. We're almost finished. Remember, we have our new direction choir that's going to come up here. But, sir, thank you so much. I hope all of you in the audience remember not to let this moment fade. Stay committed to our veterans. So if we can close this event with New Direction singing the services medley, and then please join us in the back for this wonderful reception we have for you today. So please stand.
Over hill, over dale, as we hit the dusty trail, and those caissons go rolling along. In and out, hear them shout, counter marching right about, and those caissons go rolling along. Then it's high, high, he in the field artillery, shout out to numbers loud and strong. For wherever you go, you will always know that those caissons go rolling along. Anchors away, my boys, anchors away. Farewell to knowledge joys we sail at break of day, 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 day. Through our last night on shore, drink to the foam. Until we meet once more, it's wishing you a happy voyage home. Off we go into the wild blue yonder, climbing high into the sun. Here they come, zooming to meet our thunder. Atom boys, give 'em the gun. Down we dive.